I mean, for people to fully come in.
Sure.
It's good to meet you. Where are you
Yeah, it's a
at?
pleasure. I live in Hawaii. I'm
All right.
from Southern California near Los Angeles, and we moved out to Hawaii Christmas Day 2009. My wife was born here, and we wanted to raise our daughter here, so
What island?
Oahu.
Oahu. Yeah,
Mhm.
we lived on Kauai for 10 months in
Oh, lovely.
2019 and 2020. No, I can't
Nice.
remember. 2019,
Nice. Nice.
2019,
Nice.
2018, 2019. God, time flies
It really
tran-
does, doesn't it?
in this transition we call ascension. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
It's a miracle. It really is. I am so happy to be alive currently that
Mhm. Right.
I just grateful.
Right. I mean, it's like there's not, there's a perfect order to the universe, and you get what what goes around comes around, and there's a lot of souls on this earth that have done a lot of inner work, and it has to, and it's starting to, regardless of the distortion, starting to show itself in a collective manner, or at least you know,
That's
uh,
right.
it's happening, and
Yeah.
so it's kind of good to be in these communities because it offsets all the bullshit, which I don't get caught up in. I'm just saying
Right, right.
it captures a lot of people's attention, and therefore, where your focus goes is, where your energy goes,
Right.
grows, right? But yeah. So we got people rolling in now. 2 minutes. We got Michael, a new friend. Uh, in typical Soulogy fashion, we're just gonna get to know each other in front of everybody. Uh, so
Awesome.
I want to welcome you from Hawaii. Hawaii.
Yes.
I want to welcome you, and I've been thinking about Hawaii a lot lately, wondering why I'm in Arkansas. Yeah,
You are
but
exactly where you're supposed to be, though, aren't you?
absolutely, I'm sitting on a portal. I'm sitting on a multitude of portals, I think, over here. But yeah, the crystal beds and everything. There's
Hmm.
so many special places around the world, really. I mean, when you think about it, you, if I'm not mistaken, you responded to one of Morgan's posts. I think this month. She's been focusing on what she calls the hero's journey. I don't know if that's how you contacted her, if it was just through our regular channels.
Um, you know, I I remember Morgan messaging me and inviting me to be a part of one of your interviews, and
Hmm.
I was just simply honored to
Yeah.
be a part of that. And I regularly post my excerpts from my books in uh, other people's groups, including your Soulology group, and it's been quite an adventure. I started my I will call it the last leg of my ascension on Earth. Uh, Started April 12th, 2020, which happened to be Easter Sunday. I was just inspired by the teachings of Christ, and I have been researching a concept that I've been working on, and I've been researching it for 47 years, since the age of 3. And what happened at the age of 3 was my first awakening was caused by a an eye injury. My twin brother Patrick and I were playing with toy guns, and he proceeded to jab the the business end of the gun in my left eye. And I can only imagine how painful that must have been, but I don't remember the pain. What I remember is, first and foremost, being concerned about my parents, who just totally freaked out, and understandably so. And I was also concerned about my brother getting in trouble. And I remember seeing my dad's purple shirt. I remember the drive to the hospital, looking out the window. I remember being pushed into into the surgical room because I felt the effects of the drugs, and I also remember the smell of the anesthesia as I was going under. And for years, that was my earliest memory until in my early 20s, I saw a photograph of our third birthday, and and then it clicked. It's like, oh my gosh, my actual first memory was seeing the candles on. We each had our own cake, and I remember seeing the flame of the middle candle, and remembering how it moved, the colors of it, and even the sound of it as a 3-year-old. So that was my actual first vision, and it was a vision of 2020, which I believe we will later come to call year 0 because of everything that's currently happening in the world and what started to come about in 2020, where people just started to basically wake up, and that's basically what I write about, is how feelings are the most effective form of communication in the universe. While math might be a very precise form of measurement, feelings are understood by all beings.
Yeah. And how old were you?
I was 3.
Wow.
So I just had this idea at that age that I was meant for something, and I didn't know what, but I came to realize that I'm a philosopher, and I'm also a musician and an artist, and a husband and a father, and all of these other sorts of roles. But my primary function as a human being is to provide answers to these existential questions that we all have. Why do we exist? Why does evil exist? Why does anything exist? And there's answers to all of those questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Who am I? What are we doing here?
Who am I? What am I? Why am I? Yeah.
Did you have any other, moments, seminal moments,
Oh yeah.
traumas?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A lot of people.
I was blessed with a few things. Both my twin brother and I, we were adopted. My biological mother was an addict. Our father was also an addict. He was murdered at a young age, and I came to know my biological family in 1993, including that I have a sister, a 5-year-old sister, Fawn, and we have a great relationship. My childhood was quite a blessing. My mom and dad, Jesse and Wilma, raised us and loved us deeply and gave us all kinds of opportunities, Little League, soccer. I played a musical instrument at the age of 10. We had all kinds of opportunities to experience life and enjoy life as children do. I didn't realize what it was that was going to happen later on because of my mother being an addict and being basically born addict. I believe my mother was under the influence of drugs while she was pregnant. I grew up with obsessive compulsive disorder and didn't realize what it was. My parents just thought that it was cute that I was a super neat freak. And I also have come to understand that I have ADHD and developed in junior high school. And it was really quite an adventure up until the age of 17, where I was sexually abused by a man, and I buried that for a few years, and then just basically went down the rabbit hole when that realization of what occurred came back to me my senior year of college. And then I just used all kinds of drugs, a lot of marijuana and a lot of LSD in a short period of time, and had, you know, some epiphanies and revelations. I somehow graduated from college with a degree in English, and I ended up living on the streets for a little while. I ended up going to jail for a time, and got out, got clean, worked the 12 steps, and I've been clean since July 6th of 1995. And then during that period of my life, I really learned what depression is all about. I was raised as a Presbyterian and never became a member of the church, but understood the truth of what Christ taught in terms of love and forgiveness and having faith. And then I studied Buddhism, but got stuck in a paradox of believing that if all I need to do to no longer suffer is detach from everything. Well, be careful what you ask for, because when you think you know something, you actually have no idea until you actually experience it. So that real dark period of depression that lasted for a couple, where I became suicidal. I just didn't want to live. I also didn't want to put my parents through the horrible experience of their son dying. So I just toughed it out, and then was okay in the meantime, because I found Taoism and understood how to basically feel everything, accept and allow for information to come in, and realize that enlightenment is not an event, it's a process, and it's a journey that has no final destination. So it was last year where I began to unravel the paradox of Buddhism, where I realized that suffering is a choice, pain is a part of reality, but it's only a way to signal what it is that you're meant to learn. So suffering is useful until you no longer need to suffer. So this is where I started writing down my thoughts about this theory that feelings are the most effective form of communication in the universe. But I make the connections between science and spirituality, psychology and religion, and philosophy and faith. And I tapped into both hemispheres of my brain to allow for information to be received logically, but also intuitively, because I'm very much aware of the conditioning that humans have been undergoing for thousands of years, where you're taught to only believe what you see and always do what you're told. Well, that requires one or two at the most senses. Instead of doing that, I learned how to use all 5 of my basic senses and the 3 spiritual senses, being that of taste, which is called proprioception, motion, and time.
Never heard
so
that.
I feel everything. But then I also understand that we're not supposed to control our emotions. We're supposed to express our emotions. What we can control is the order of our thoughts, and we can reorder from a new menu, if you like, anything that we wish to think about. We don't need to live in those fearful thoughts like we've been conditioned and programmed to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah. And yeah, what you were saying about the suffering thing, because it's like you hear life is tough, or, life is life. Life is life, it's
Sure.
And I like what you say about the emotions too, because, we've talked about that on this show, over the years, and the idea of sitting with your emotions, like that was a new experience for me. Started like late 2019 to start sitting with anger, sitting with sadness, whatever it was, just allowing it, and the incredible, I guess, in a micro cosmic kind of way, it's a transformation, really. I mean, because if you think about it, you get these emotions, and of course we know the story. We suppress them, especially men. That's just means you're just delaying it. It's just on the back burner. It's coming back, and it's going to come back a little hotter and heavier. But it's interesting to sit with emotion, regardless, or really even whatever it is, and then watch it dissipate. It was a weird experience for me, and is when I first really started to engage that. And I've heard a lot of people talk about it. I've heard a lot of people talk about that. So I think he said it was three. What did you call them? The three senses, the spiritual senses.
The three spiritual senses.
Somebody asked.
What I've been realizing is that, through these ideas of being taught to control your emotions, and emotions is energy in motion, and it's used to transform the raw data that you receive through your senses, and it is a transformation, but it's transformational because you're combining the thoughts, the imagery, and those emotions, as well as these other extrasensory perceptual feelings, and you make it into a kind of a cosmic soup, if you like, because it's really I mean, all of you receive, everything that you experience is nothing more than a communication between your consciousness and God's consciousness. So it doesn't matter what you call God's consciousness. You could call it pure energy, you could call it love, you could call it spirit. That doesn't matter. What matters is that you appreciate what's occurring instead of thinking that you're being punished. Is life a challenge? Yeah, absolutely, it's a challenge. But if it wasn't a challenge, would you appreciate what you have? I don't know. Maybe not.
Or you wouldn't have any contrast. I mean, that's the whole paradox of that's the whole paradox of you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? Like I remember understanding 10 years ago when I started going down this road, that because I was like you, 2 years homeless, went to jail, lots of drugs, the whole thing, sex, drugs, rock and roll, and then just understanding that at some point in that quote unquote dark night of the soul, or let's just say, let's make that plural for all of us, that you can only go above the line, so to speak, to the degree that you've gone below the line. because think about it, you don't have anything to compare it to. And it goes back to what you said too about the emotions.
Mhm.
It's one thing to, like you said, something happens and then the word suffering comes into the field. Is it the resistance of the emotion and the lack of acceptance to what has occurred that creates the pain and suffering, or is it the emotion itself? Well, I'm at that time, 58 years old, 57, 58 years old, and I learned, thank you, Morgan, but go sit with that emotion, try that, see what happens. I found it amazing that, how it just dissipates. There is no procedure. There is no written process. You just sit and you just feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, you're expressing it. So if you think that you have to try to do something such as expressing your emotion, then this is where, this is what Master Yoda, when Luke tried to lift his spacecraft out of the swamp, right after Yoda tells him there is no try, there's only do or do not, and then he still doesn't listen, and he tries, and he fails, and then he storms off and he pouts, and then Yoda does his thing, lifts the spaceship out, moves it over to a clearing, sets it down, and then Luke comes over and he's like totally like bewildered, and he says to Yoda, he says, "I don't believe it." And Yoda says, "And that is why you fail." So the belief system is really where the magic happens, isn't it? Because if you understand that all of your experiences were meant for you, or they wouldn't have happened,
right,
then you can take a step further and realize that it's just a communication. So if you look at your experience as being traumatic, you will suffer because you will feel like you had been punished, and why did that happen to me, whatever. Okay. If you understand that every experience is something that you can learn from, and then if, for example, you encounter another being that's suffering because they went through a similar experience and they don't understand why, you can retell your story and say, this is exactly why it happened. And you can share with them the knowledge that you have as far as how you found peace in spite of that horrible thing that happened to you.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Yeah. The beliefs are both the prize and the poison, right? Potentially. And here we go with the polarities and the paradox again.
Yeah. It's beautiful because
blessings are burdens and burdens are blessings. Just go look at the metrics on people that win lottery. What is the stat? I think roughly is 95% of people that win the big lotteries, million plus lotteries, don't have the money after 5 years, and
they blow it.
Their whole life is disaster. Relationships, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And then you look at the story that you had, which I can relate to. So many similar things there. You're right. Because I can remember being in the middle of it, and there was a peace. There was a point where, what else do you want? Bring it. It's like, bring it.
Yeah.
Because you become impervious to, or maybe you become aware that what's the old saying? If it doesn't, did it really hurt you? If it didn't kill you, whatever that statement is.
Whatever doesn't kill you only makes you stronger.
True. Yes. There you go.
And I believe that. Here's something that I learned. Part of the reason why I went down this avenue of thinking in terms of how feelings are effective forms of communication, the reason for that is because of how they're understood. So when I talk about what I know, I sometimes will get some backlash, and people will say, "Oh, you're being egotistical, or you don't know what you're talking about, or who are you to tell me what da 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 da. So then I will often defend my position by simply stating that, first of all, I know nothing. Now, most of the time when people hear that, they think you're being falsely humble, because they don't understand what nothingness is. If you've ever experienced the void of nothingness, pure nothing, you will know where everything comes from.
Mm-hmm.
You will know the beauty in the silent stillness of the dark, and realize that that is when you desire nothing. You have no reason to know more. You have no wish to be anywhere but there. And that's when time stands still.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Yeah. And there to go with the full extent of the paradox. And you can't, and I love what you said too about the, you can be told something, you can read something, you can, be instructed, whatever. But until you experience it, if you do, you don't know it. That's just all there is to it. You can
Yeah.
talk about it,
Mhm.
and it's interesting watching the evolution of this community and other communities, like communities. We just call them whatever: light workers, starseed,
Mhm.
awakening, ascension. Uh, it's a beautiful thing to see people expressing, better to express than not, especially now.
Yes. Yes.
Even if it's a flawed and shadowed expression or even a projection, because
Mhm.
I was triggered this morning. I have to give value to the effort. But it's interesting watching it, because in watching the mirrors that make up these communities, the mirrors of ourselves, you can see the journey. You can see
Mhm.
the ego. You can see the higher
Yeah.
self. But it's so interesting, because as this convergence continues, you know, well, I guess another way to put it is, I'm not who I was yesterday, and you're not who you were yesterday. And at some point through this type of journey that you lived and share, and others like you get to a point where you understand that for yourself. You understand that I'm not who I was yesterday. I'm not the one that was in that jail cell or addicted to whatever. And then you start to see that in other people,
Mhm.
and that's what I'm seeing. Like, people starting to go, well, I always say, go easy on yourself and go easy on each other, because we're all going through the same thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, I, regardless of everything that's happened, and I really want to go back to what happened in April 2020, and just because I'm curious, but I think we're doing a heck of a job. I mean, this is not work for the faint-hearted. I mean, I don't care who it is, and I don't care what role they're playing. If you're walking this planet, incarnated in a human body,
Yeah.
you more than likely, well, you're a valiant soul. Period.
You're valuable to the universe, or you wouldn't exist. I believe it goes a step further.
Mm-hmm.
No being, no thing exists in this reality against their will.
That's right.
So if a human thinks that they are trapped on Prison Planet or the Matrix or whatever, um, they're just simply not yet aware of the absolute truth of why they exist in the first place. So, yes, when somebody is suffering, it's because they are unclear as to the point of the message that's being transmitted. So what people like you and I are learning is that we're only responsible for our own well-being and consciousness. We're not here to save anyone. We're definitely not here to save the planet. Mother Earth is very capable of taking care of business,
Thank you.
and that is just the way it is.
I agree.
We also don't have to carry the burden of judgment anymore.
Hmm.
This is one of the things that Christ taught, is to forgive others, is practice for the final exam of forgiving yourself. Once you can forgive yourself for everything that you think you did wrong, everything that you believe is a sin or an accident or a mistake, is really nothing more than signs, SINES, signals, symbols, and synchronicities. So you use the word paradigm, and one of the things that we really no longer need to do is think about things in terms of oppositional dichotomies. We're very, very capable of using our conscious minds and our creative imaginations to rediscover and relearn everything that is already known. How funny is it the last time you had a revelation? And yes, it's amazing, and it's like, and you might laugh, you might cry, you might do both. Those aha moments become ha 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 moments when you understand that you haven't learned anything new. You've remembered something that's already existed.
That's right. It's like a trigger. A trigger, we use the word trigger a lot.
Yes.
And there's a, I don't want to say there's a negative connotation, but there's a let's just say it's not all hunky dory. And when we have that, but the trigger is that. The trigger is basically the universal activation for you on a personal level to, like you said, remember. And that's another thing that I think I've seen in the last year and a half occurring in these communities, and I guess collectively and within myself and so on, is just there's less of a charge to that word or that experience, because I think we are starting to realize, certainly on an unconscious level, and more and more on a conscious level, that these are gifts. These are those SINESs that you're talking about. And in listening to you as well, it just kind of comes to me that, we talk about transmutation and we talk about transformation. These are, like almost like more of a characteristic of what is a transcendence while we're in the flesh. We often think, well, we hit enlightenment, Buddha, whatever, Enoch, and then you spontaneous combust and you rise. But I feel like that there's something about what's happened here, and now we're at the culmination where there's a physicality to the reality that's not going to go away. And that was kind of how we set the game up, and that this transcendence will occur in the flesh, so to speak, so that the things, for instance, like you bring up Jesus, who's been prominent in many people's, lives, obviously, that energy, that consciousness, whatever you want to call it, person, that the things that were done by, are documented, of that person, and those like that person throughout history that have
Yes.
made it through the cracks for us to be exposed to. It really is available to us all. It is not a pipe dream. It's really probably the biggest belief system that we've got that will fall, with in the final scheme of things, the acceptance of our own capabilities, skills, abilities, power, intuitive, sensitivities, higher sensitivities. I mean, this is magic in the flesh here that we're on the cusp of. This isn't the end of the world. This is the beginning of something so far out there. The whole universe is on the edge of their seat watching.
The end of time as we know it, yes, absolutely. But it's not what you think unless your perception is such that you choose to think of it in those terms. So the idea of people being left behind, people like literally floating up into the sky. What it is that is actually occurring is happening within the 0th dimension of God's imagination. And in God's imagination, anything is possible. If going back to the belief system and how that relates to faith, what we can do is start with that premise: anything is possible. Now, if you were to ask somebody, do you believe anything is possible? I love the answers. I will sometimes get an emphatic yes, and other times I'll get a yes, but X, Y, and Z. Right? So free will allows for any possibility to be chosen, including predetermination. So when you say you can't do it, you are determining that you won't do it. So your belief system is, you earlier said, you used the term poison, or prize. I forget what you said.
The prize and the
poison or prize. Okay. Your belief system, it's a very beautifully intricate process. All beliefs, one of the things that I learned from somebody that inspired me to better understand how feelings are the most effective form of communication in the universe was a friend of mine that I've known since, like, I think we were 8 years old. He's a pure determinist, and he thinks that he has a way to prove that determinism is our reality, that free will does not exist. So what's funny is he got stuck on this idea that nobody's going to believe him, and it's going to take years for people to understand what he's talking about. So then he has predetermined the success of his theory being presented.
Yes. Yes.
Whereas,
yes, like yes.
Right.
Yes.
So,
well, like people saying those people aren't awake. They don't get it. They'll never get it.
You have no way of knowing what somebody else is thinking. To make that assumption is the I'm going to say the word lowest degree of knowing, which is called an opinion. When you have an opinion, you're welcome to that opinion, but you've used one or two at the most of your senses to form that opinion. So the electromagnetic so we talk about believing what you see. The electromagnetic spectrum is composed of 0.0035%. So 0.0035% of of the entire electromagnetic spectrum is what we call visible light. Okay. Right. So Einstein, the brilliant genius that he was, E equals mc squared shows the relationship between energy and physical matter. And then people say, oh, well, he was wrong, da 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 da. He wasn't wrong. He was stuck in the paradox of accepting the spiritual aspect of quantum mechanics. So he had debates with Niels Bohr, and Niels Bohr is thought to have won those debates. What they were debating is actually Einstein's certainty. He wanted to show that things can be determined based on certain probability. So his goal was to unify all of these things that we call forces, which are not forces, by the way. So gravity, electromagnetic, nuclear strong, nuclear weak. These are not forces. These are influences that work together in a symbiotic fashion. So when somebody says, when a scientist says, it is a fact that X, Y, and Z exists, okay, true. However, when that same being says what you're believing is just a fairy tale and just in your head and just in your imagination, well, yeah, where else is anyone's reality occurring but in their imagination? So when somebody says that what you believe is wrong, or what you believe is harmful, or what you believe is just not true, you're negating that being's existence.
That's right. And, this is good because, I mean, quantum creation, it's getting to the point, I think, where we're going to start to realize. You mentioned the word responsible earlier. Like, what's really the bottom line here? I mean, it's like, what are these? What are the characteristics of the alignment? One of them is learning self-responsibility. But what I'm saying is, like, getting to the point where you start to understand. Let's say I'm in a business arrangement with somebody, and I have thoughts that they're screwing me, or I have thoughts that they're not, they don't have integrity. Well, that's a powerful thing, even though that's a mirror of me, and that's a living human hybrid soul, whatever you want to call it. How do I know or not know the degree of my quantum creative ability to affect that person? Right? It's kind of like when people say, hey, if you got a great idea and you got a plan, I used to apply this in the business world. I'd tell my team, hey, let's just stay low in the grass. Let's implement everything. Don't tell anybody. And by the time they figure it out, we'll be so far out there, they won't be able to catch us. In other words, that energy, and Morgan reminds me of this a lot because I tend to talk and say things, and I've learned, like everybody else, we learn. But that energy that's coming at you from other people, it's real. And just because I'm not an object or an inanimate, something or another, a spoon that can be bent, how do I know that, I'm not affected, and more so that I can't affect? So this whole thing about the alignment of thoughts, words, and actions, I think is really coming to the forefront now. And one thing about this energy that seems to be very consistent is there is an expansion of a reality that this universal energy will, here we go with the prize and the poison. This universal energy that's expanding on this earth, being grounded by individuals like you, is supporting growth. It's supporting heartfelt intention. It's supporting service. It's supporting the Trinity energy. But at the same time, if you don't want to play, or if you want to ignore it, it's going to beat the shit out of you.
Well, here's, I love that analogy. And one of the things that I've come to understand and realize is this notion that the truth hurts. I'm going to offer some deep truth that people can either take it or leave it. The truth never hurts. Denying it will. So when you ignore your feelings because you deny that your intuition is powerful, it's a means of understanding, and you can use that to assess your situation without being judgmental. Listen, I love all beings. Are there people that I don't like? Yeah, absolutely. Are there things that I don't like and processes that I don't like? Yes, of course. We're not supposed to like everything. We're supposed to appreciate and respect the value in these experiences and other people. And when we get caught up in these ideas of, oh, well, I need to wake up other people. No, no. You are only responsible for your own well-being. Now, does that mean that you stop having compassion? Absolutely not. I am a very compassionate man. I'm also very passionate, and I will defend my spirit and the spirit of my family with my life if I have to. Now, I can say that with pure love and grace and peacefulness. Do I seem angry to you? No. But if you want to experience my wrath and my anger, you're welcome to. And everybody deserves to feel however they are currently feeling. Now, that doesn't mean that the universe is punishing anybody either. Karma is not a bitch. Karma is perfectly fair and just. She is causality that readjusts our perception, allowing us to better understand why what we think, say, and do affects the universe.
Yeah.
So if you're a loving being, guess what? You're going to feel love back. If you're hateful, spiteful, destructive, and deceitful, guess what you're going to experience?
And there's the quantum thing again, right? I mean, and, I think sometimes I think about the often over the years, made in the image. And like everything, it takes on a wider and sometimes even a more specific definition as we go further into this journey and we become more expansive because we have a higher perception. But the whole thing with the what you were saying at the beginning, this is God's imagination. I'm a fractal of that. I'm made in the image, micro, macro. So, and remember what you said about karma and even the universe itself, God, whatever you want to call it. You gotta remember, this is Earth. We're a fishbowl in the multiverses.
Yeah.
We got a whole different set of rules here. And it doesn't mean that anything has been superseded. It's an experiment. It's an experience. Yes. It's whatever it is. But we're talking about source as a subjective, non-opinionated kind of thing. And
sure.
By human perspective, by the human comprehension of trying to put all this together, did God, do you think that it was just went out, and there was no trial and error? There was no success and failure? So when I think of made in the image, I think, wow, I mean, what an evolution that would be, which is what you've just perfectly described, is to gain this information, to refine the process and create something that is an experience of more ease and grace, comfort, joy, pleasure. But how are you going to know if you don't try, right? So these, it's interesting to watch the what's happening, the dynamics of what's happening with the distortion. And this is what I love about what you said, because I look at this example that's happening all over the world right now, and it's like this subjective force, which could be seen as a big fat trigger, let's just say, is really just pushing to see how long it's going to take, or not see how long it's going to take, until the individual soul goes, I'm not giving my power away anymore. Like, wait a minute. You know what I mean? You said you
Mm-hmm.
were willing to physically die. I feel
Mm-hmm.
the same. We all have our enough is enough points. And I don't know about your uh, experience. I can look at my own. I think again they were very similar. Some of the things you talked about, but you get to a point where you say, "I'm good. Come on, come get me." Like it's not even real. Like this is
Yeah.
one stop. Not to take anything away from it,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm a big believer that how you leave is how you start. So whatever charge we have, whatever degree off the 0 point we are on it or whatever, when we leave, the journey continues, the lessons continue. And again, it's subjective. It's not like good or bad. But you did mention earlier, which I'm interested to
Mm-hmm.
hear, in terms of you talked about dark and light, what that is. Is that, I'm just curious, is the, how do you put this? Is dark and light ultimately the same here as it is everywhere? You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes, I believe it is. What I have come to understand about the universe is that everything is binary encoded, but it's not good and bad, God and Satan. Um, it is ones and zeros, but one is the light. Um, Zero is the sound.
Hmm.
And once we get away from calling the dark,
Cool.
because words matter.
Yeah.
Same thing with negative energy. Um, the only thing negative about anything is what you think of it when you allow it to cause yourself to doubt why you exist. So everything is not just one or zero, it can be becoming and being. So I'm learning how to become light being sound. In other words, I learned how to use both of my hemispheres, the logical and the intuitive, as a filter to decipher the encoded messages that's coming as raw data.
Hmm.
So I can decode anything by asking why does it exist, and then I reverse engineer all the rest. So why does suffering exist? Why does evil? Why all of these things? You used the word contrast earlier, and it is contrast. That's a beautiful word, because without the contrast, you have no way to understand the difference.
Yeah.
And it's all about understanding and understanding and then overstanding this whole
And
thing that
then
we
and then
call
and then
life.
create and then creating a new. That's why I was saying about the image made in the image,
Absolute,
because
absolutely.
yeah, like I mean, my bride says a copy is a copy is a copy. And again, it takes on a greater meaning. But if I place myself, if I and I fully believe I'm made in the image, I fully believe I am that. I don't understand all the mechanics of it, but I do understand that at the core, it's 100%. So
Mm-hmm.
if I put myself in those shoes, I was like, I'm it, and I have a thought, and then it creates something. Oh wow, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's play with this. Oh, it's almost like
Yeah.
playing a video game, but you're building a story, and then you hit a dead end or you die and you start over, and you go back down the same path, make a few different choices, get to that place,
Right.
make a new choice. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
we're doing that in the flesh, and that's a pretty wild, fascinating proposition. And to me, it is the it's not so much to me like what, I'm going to do this in this life. I'm going to go down and do this and that. It's more like, to me, it's more like I'm going to lay this template down from the Akashic, to follow, and then I'm going to go out and bring my point to a space where I have an expanded potential and opportunity to create something new.
Mm-hmm.
And in this world, on the surface, from the human condition, it makes no sense. But there are people all over the world right now doing stuff that makes no sense at all. And it's fascinating, and it's magical, and it's alchemical.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
my wife's over in her home country in Australia, in Queensland. She didn't plan on going there. There's all these women around her that are, and we're talking like 60 years old, that, stories like, I left my house. I just knew I had to get rid of everything, and I'm in my car and I'm just driving around and seeing what happens. Like, that's insane. Like, from conventional standards, you know what I mean? But
I
it's
love
happening, and that's a physical representation of an energetic transformation and evolution that's getting to a point where nobody has the answer. It's really just like, hey, everybody's being brought to an even playing field. Everybody's going to be dressed down, buck naked to the soul. And that's not a bad thing, because all of that has to be exposed in order for us. It's no different than the personal transformation, shadow work, and zero pointing that people do within themselves. Because when they get on the other side, or when we get on the other side in these phases, in these stages, there's a new Todd. There's a new Michael, after, integrating and balancing and bringing into the 0 point field, whatever it was that we were triggered on, or whatever it was that we were brought to that point. I'm with you, like from the top of the show when you said, I'm just excited, happy to be here. I mean, this is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal, it really is. And there's that old saying, you only get the chance to do something. You only get a first chance once, right? I mean, like, we know we're eternal. It's not like that, but here we are in the present. It's not going to happen again. This is the boldest, most, the possibilities are at the utmost. And the awareness, to me, is again, like what you've seen so many people do, moving inside and really finding themselves, and in that journey, discovering the new, as they get rid of the old identities, it's kind of discovering the true identities and the true nature, and the true capabilities and power. Amazing world. It's an incredible world.
It is so miraculous. I used to think about this as a kid, this idea. I've always believed in God. My faith has never wavered. And I've always been amazed at the idea that an atheist would have in terms of God not existing, and that somehow all of our reality came from nothing, even though they love talking about, the first law of thermodynamics: energy is neither created nor destroyed, it only transforms from one state of being to another. So I will very often use the first law of thermodynamics to prove, alongside with E equals mc squared and the 0th law of thermodynamics, which is if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. I'm able to basically prove how anything can exist, which that may sound like a like a wild claim. Like, how can you prove that? Well, you cannot, for example, prove that anything of a spiritual nature does not exist unless your proof is something that can be measured and observed. Now, one of the things that I realized about our imagination is that we can observe images, we can listen to sounds, that both light forms and sound forms can exist in your imagination and can be observed and felt without being manifested in our physical reality. And how do I know that? Because who doesn't know the experience of having a song stick in their head?
Mm-hmm.
Or remembering an image that we call a memory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how else would you explain the coexistence of physical reality and spiritual actuality? So the true symbiotic relationship between what we call reality and actuality is physical and spiritual. It's a merger. It's a holy reunion of the one and the zero, the perfect 10.
Mm.
And that's what's necessary when when a scientist denies the spiritual experience of another being as not being real, they're denying that being's actual existence. When a spiritual being says, "Oh, well, science is not the whole picture, and I don't believe," you have to learn to accept the truth in all things in order to become more aware, because it really is about one thing. It's a conversation between your consciousness and your awareness. So your consciousness is your power and your ability to do three things: communicate, perceive, and create. And then your awareness feels all of those experiences.
Mm.
And then as you become more aware, because you better understand the purpose of whatever it is that you're experiencing, then you've accepted the truth in the light, being sound, allowing for your awareness to blossom and expand.
Mm. Yeah, I like the thing with the binary, because it's like if you have the one, then the zero, or you have the zero and the one, it's the same thing.
Same thing.
Right?
That's
So
why people,
like zero is the science and one is the spirituality, right? And it doesn't matter. It's one. It's still gonna.
Either way it works. Yeah. Either way it works. Yeah. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? It doesn't matter. Unless you feel it necessary to tell that part of the story, which is a slice of infinity. So time is not the fourth dimension. It's friction that is allowing you to experience an occurrence. When I was in high school, my dad and I used to talk about physics a lot. And he was the one that taught me and got me to understand that these physicists at the time that were finding these subatomic particles, what they were doing is they first conceived of the idea, and then they used their technology to observe it. But they didn't observe something that was already there. They actually created it. God gave us the basic elements and the atom, and said, have fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Create whatever you want. And my dad asked me what my definition of time was. So as a 16-year-old kid, I thought about it for 2 seconds, and I said, time is the interval between two occurrences. Because that at that point in time, that was my understanding of how time functioned. in a linear sense, and it does. But then you have people say, oh no, time doesn't exist, it's an illusion. Well, all of reality is an illusion, but an illusion is only meant to hold your attention while you receive the rest of the message.
Yeah. Yeah, time is not real based on that limited perception. Time is just a block of information. It's a block of code. That's it. It's no different than you go see a movie. That was it. Or you and I have this encounter. That's there's information, there's code, right? I mean, yeah, good conversation. Very good conversation. I really happy that we connected. Maybe later.
I love it.
Yeah,
Loved
and I
it.
want to say I appreciate you, and I have seen your stuff. I appreciate you sharing, and everyone that shares in the Soulogy group. It's a very active group, much more active, and it's been that way since day one. A slow, deliberate expansion, but it's because people are sharing over the years, and I really appreciate you doing that. I'd love to collaborate with you later in the year. If you're up for it, and
I'd love to.
Yeah, dig into some more of this stuff. It's a nice conversation and a good subject matter, and I appreciate your down to earthness, and I'm still trying to get my arms around having a father discovery or discussions in my if I had, looking at you, recalling these stories of the discussions that you had with your father on that was a kind of a special thing. I mean, that's just not something that goes on every day, having those discussions.
I was so blessed. Jesse and Wilma, our mom and dad that adopted Patrick and myself, were just great people. They have since passed. And we were very, very fortunate to have been raised in Glendora, California, near Los Angeles. And we went to Glendora High School. And I recently found out that Tony Robbins is a graduate from Glendora High School, which I didn't know, which is really interesting. It kind of makes some sense in a way. Yeah, I love talking about this stuff. So I appreciate your time. I love talking about all of these things: consciousness, perception. And a lot of people just don't want to talk about these things. But I mean, what else are you going to talk about? I mean, you could talk about whatever you want, but why not talk about creativity and imagination and life? I mean, that's what philosophy is. It's not the love of knowledge as much as it is the love of life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is it. When you get right down to it, after everything, I'm here, you're here, we're here right now, and this is all we got. I mean,
perfect.
This is the only thing we can put our finger on. I mean, really, everything else past and forward.
And where else would you want to be but right here, right now? So I am very honored to have had the time to talk and share time and space with you. Namaste, Todd. It's been a sheer pleasure and a joy. Thank you.
Yeah. Take care, brother. We'll see y'all. We'll be back in 45 minutes with the last show. Thank you so much. We look forward